Alec Baldwin. Manslaughter charges. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Alec Baldwin was charged last Thursday with involuntary manslaughter in connection to the fatal shooting of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins on the set of the film Rust last year. Following a lengthy investigation, the New Mexico First Judicial District Attorney's Office announced charges stemming from the October 2021 shooting on Thursday. In addition to Baldwin, the film's armourer, Halyna Hutchins, will also face involuntary manslaughter charges, while First Assistant Director David Halls was hit with a negligent use of a deadly weapon charge. Halls has already agreed to plead guilty to that count. After a thorough review of the evidence and the laws of the state of New Mexico, I have determined that there is sufficient evidence to file criminal charges against Alec Baldwin and other members of the Rust film crew. New Mexico First Judicial District Attorney Mary Carmack-Altwiez said in a statement, "On my watch, no one is above the law, and everyone deserves justice. If any one of these three people, Alec Baldwin, Halyna Hutchins, or David Halls, had done their job, Halyna Hutchins would be alive today. It's that simple," Andrea Reeb, the special prosecutor appointed by the DA to the case, added. The evidence clearly shows a pattern of criminal disregard for safety on the Rust film set. In New Mexico, there is no room for film sets that don't take our state's commitment to gun safety and public safety seriously. According to the District Attorney's Office, both Baldwin and Gutierrez-Reed will be charged in the alternative, with the 2 counts of manslaughter, meaning that a jury would decide not simply if they were guilty, but under which definition of involuntary manslaughter they were guilty. If found guilty of just involuntary manslaughter, a 4th-degree felony, both would face up to 18 months in prison. However, if found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in the commission of a lawful act, which includes a firearm enhancement on the charge, the punishment is a mandatory 5-year prison sentence. The charges will formally be filed later this month, at which point each defendant will receive a summons to appear at the first hearing. The District Attorney's Office noted that the defendants could appear virtually at the hearing. Hutchins was killed and director Joel Souza was wounded during a rehearsal on the set of Rust on October 21, 2021. The incident occurred when Baldwin inadvertently discharged a prop gun that had been loaded with a live round. There have been numerous investigations into the incident by various government agencies, from the Santa Fe Sheriff Office to the FBI. The New Mexico First Judicial District Attorney's Office had also been conducting its own investigations, with recent actions suggesting it was gearing up to file charges. Back on September the 23rd, the New Mexican reported that the State Board of Finance had awarded the DA's office over $317,000 out of a requested $635,000 to prosecute people connected to the shooting. While District Attorney Mary Carmack-Altwiez declined to say who would face criminal charges at the time, the original funding request noted Baldwin as one of the possible defendants. Though these are the first criminal charges to be brought in connection to Hutchins' death, the shooting has prompted several civil lawsuits as well as some fines. Most notably, Hutchins' family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Baldwin, Rust producer Ryan Donald Smith, rookie armourer Halyna Hutchins-Reed, assistant director Dave Halls, prop master Sarah Zachary, and armourer mentor Seth Kenny. The Hutchins family lawsuit read in part, Halyna Hutchins deserved to live, and the defendants had the power to prevent her death if they had only held sacrosanct their duty to protect the safety of every individual on a set where firearms were present, instead of cutting corners on safety procedures where human lives were at stake, rushing to stay on schedule and ignoring numerous complaints of safety violations. Baldwin has denied responsibility for Hutchins' death and demanded the wrongful death suit be taken to arbitration in a filing this past March. That is the current position with regard to the charges brought against Alec Baldwin. As I've explained to you elsewhere, last year I undertook an analysis of both Alec Baldwin and his wife Hilary, or Hilaria as she prefers to be known. If you haven't watched that already and you'd like to do so to understand what they are, I recommend that you pause this video, go and watch those ones, which you can easily find by searching my channel, and then come back here to hear the remainder of what I have to tell you. If you already understand my analysis and grasp what Baldwin is, then we can continue. The question then is posed, what do these charges mean to Alec Baldwin as an unaware narcissist? Baldwin is an upper lesser type B. This means that he's brash, belligerent, bombastic, a boaster. He evidently is a talented actor. Many of his performances are worthwhile watching, particularly that in Glengarry Glen Ross. But as you know, perhaps from your own observations of his behaviour, and of course as a consequence of my excellent analysis of him, he's an odious individual who has a short fuse and lashes out repeatedly when he faces threats to control. Those who've been on the receiving end of a Baldwin blast in the street will give you testament to the heated fury that he exhibits. We have, of course, seen various pieces of video footage which demonstrate the way that he behaves and how he's governed by his narcissism. But what do these charges mean to him? Well, consciously, he doesn't believe that he's done anything wrong. He believes that he's as much a victim as Halyna Hutchins. He doesn't see how he's at fault. The reason being is that his narcissism will not allow him to view himself as being at fault. He, of course, fired the gun, so who else's fault could it be? Many of you, in comments on an earlier video, have quite rightfully pointed out the gun etiquette that ought to be adopted, and the fact is Baldwin didn't adhere to any of those aspects. And therefore, irrespective of the fact that there was somehow a live round placed in a prop gun, the fact is he was the one wielding the gun, and he was the one that pulled the trigger, and therefore he is the one that shot Halyna Hutchins. Now, of course, it's clear that he did not intend to kill her. It's also evident that he was unaware that there was a live round in there, at least on the evidence provided so far. And therefore, he protests that he is innocent, even though, of course, it was his finger on the trigger. In the United Kingdom, for instance, if you were to hurl a rock off your balcony and it hit somebody and killed them, you didn't intend to kill them, but you would likely be found guilty of reckless manslaughter. It was reckless to hurl a rock off your balcony, and you have to take the consequences of the fact that somebody was passing underneath, got cracked on the skull, and then died. Furthermore, if you were involved in a bar brawl and you went to hit Billy Bob, but actually, because you're pissed and you're not very good at fighting, your punch landed on Cletus, and you happened to kill Cletus with a pavement punch. The fact is that you weren't aiming to kill him and you were aiming to injure Billy Bob doesn't help you much with regard to the question of manslaughter. There's such a thing as transferred malice. The fact that you were trying to do harm to Billy Bob is transferred onto Cletus, and therefore you find yourself in difficulties with regard to the manslaughter charge. Sure, you didn't intend to kill him, but you were aiming to injure somebody else. Accordingly, with Baldwin, he's going to find himself in particular difficulties because, notwithstanding his protestations, he is the one that pulled the trigger. He is the one that had his finger on the trigger, and he is the one that pulled it. And therefore, it was the gun held by him that fired a bullet that killed Halyna Hutchins. However, his narcissism tells him he's the victim in all of this. This isn't fair. Somebody else must have caused this. That I wasn't even pulling the trigger. Somehow the gun just went off in my hand. Or, well, there shouldn't have been a bullet there. I didn't put the bullet there. It wasn't my job to check. It was somebody else's job to check. I'm there as an actor and a producer. his narcissism will repeatedly tell him, in order to deflect and nullify the threat to control posed by these charges, that he's not at fault. No matter how many times you point out to him, but look, Alec, you're the one that pulled the trigger. The gun was in your hand. You ought to have checked. His narcissism will just reject that. No, you have to understand. It was somebody else's job to check the gun. My finger wasn't even on the trigger, which might be true or it might be a lie, but nevertheless, his narcissism is going to keep telling him to say that. He regards this as a gross intrusion on his life. His narcissism will not accept it, and each time this challenge arises as a consequence of these charges being brought, it being mentioned in the media, people even doorstepping to ask him about it, it is a threat to control. And the manner in which it's conveyed to him is invariably challenge fuel. Somebody asks him about it, they're giving him fuel, but it's a threat to control because they're suggesting that he is at fault. And as you know from my work, the narcissist is never at fault. It's always somebody else or something else's fault. It cannot be the narcissist's fault, because to accept that would mean accepting a fetter, an impact upon the notion of control, and that cannot ever happen. Baldwin is perplexed as to how he's been charged. He won't even understand that there is a case to answer here. He rejects that. It's just simply not his fault. And the people that have brought this are idiots. They're incompetent arseholes. And his arrogant, brash manner as an upper-lesser type B comes to the fore. Undoubtedly, there will be rants and raves in the Baldwin household each time this is mentioned, and he asserts control indirectly by smearing the prosecutor, the armourer, anybody else that he views as at fault, as no doubt Hillary runs around like a squawking chicken, perhaps using her pseudo-false voice, perhaps not. The fact is, when this is mentioned to him, he will deny and smear and blame shift and hold other people to account. He will not accept that he's done anything wrong. And it'll be interesting, should the matter go to trial, as I anticipate that it will, and if there's live coverage of this, that we will be able to see him in action, and there'll be plenty to analyse with regard to his behaviours there. The presence of the charges is a threat to control. His narcissism is going to reject them, and he will do so in a vociferous, heated fury manner, either directly in some instances or indirectly through shifting, triangulation and blame shifting. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.